Okay, so welcome to Essential Christian Leadership, our monthly live webinar. A Spring Harvest, which is a historic and well-known event here in the UK. We've always looked at great ways to resource the local church, and with great teaching and worship. And Essential Christian Leadership is a new resource that we would like to help leaders learn and to grow stronger. Because we believe that when leaders grow stronger, the local church grows stronger as well. This month we're excited to be here in the Harrogate International Centre, a new venue for next year's Spring Harvest. And we're honoured to have with us one of the well-known speakers from Spring Harvest, and the previous chair of the event, Malcolm Duncan, is with us. I had to spend a bit of time, actually, Malcolm, looking up your bio.
That's never a good idea, sir.
The one on your blog page is quite lengthy, I must say. But this is where it gets a bit complicated. Malcolm has many hats, but he is the lead pastor of Gold Hill Baptist Church.
Yeah.
He is the husband of the one Debbie Duncan,
Yeah.
and the father of 4 beautiful children.
Well, yeah.
So far, so good.
So far, so good.
And it's got in here, you're an author, a lecturer, a broadcaster, an advocate, and a government advisor on issues of faith and cohesion.
Yeah.
That all sounds good so far. Wonderful. But for me, I guess, having known you for the last few years, this whole thing about wearing lots of different hats. And every time I meet you, you seem to be telling me a different story of a different environment, a different kind of context you've been offering support or leadership advice in. I've watched you as a leader of the Faith Works organisation, as someone playing a part with the Evangelical Alliance. And I guess one of my questions for you would be, why leading in the local church? Why not some of these other organisations? Why for you is leadership in the local church a place you decide to base yourself and to work from?
Because God called me to do it 30 years ago.
Yeah.
And I think that I will spend the best years of my life leading the local church. I'm passionate about it. I love it. It's the biggest privilege of my life after following Jesus and being a husband and father, is to be a local church pastor. I love the church that I lead at the moment. There's nothing like being in the context where you can influence people's lives. Yeah. And I think because I'm called to it, I have a deep sense that everything else that I do has to be grounded in it. So when I was the CEO of Faith Works and the head of mission at the EA, I was still pastoring a local church. I have never stopped pastoring local churches. It's always been a core part of who I am and what I do. And I think if you are in the place where you sense you can make the biggest difference for Christ, then you're in the right place. So for me, that right place involves many other things, but the fundamental linchpin of it is pastoring a local church.
And tell me about that calling piece. I think that's always, for some people, a kind of a mystery of what was that calling moment like for you, where you go, the local church and leading the local church is my thing. That's what I feel God is taking me to.
My call to local church ministry happened at the same moment as I was converted.
Okay.
So I was converted as
a
16-year-old in Belfast, and on the night that I was converted, I can remember very clearly saying to myself, if this is true, then I will give my whole life to it. And if it is true, I will spend my life serving the local church. I know, I just knew. Yeah. And that's what I've done.
Have there been any times where you've doubted that? You know, you've had moments you go, oh, really? Did I mishear that? Or you've always been some of these people that just, I'm constant and I'm confident in the calling on my life?
I've doubted my ability many times, and I've tried to walk away from it on a number of occasions. I've made more mistakes than I can shake a stick at. And there have been a few occasions when I have wondered, am I cut out for this? Am I doing the right thing with my life? Am I hurting other people? Yeah. I think when you make mistakes in pastoral leadership, the consequences of them can be very severe. Yeah. And they can leave you really feeling, I don't want to hurt people. But I've never doubted my calling to it. I have doubted my ability. Yeah. And I've doubted whether I'm in the right place. And I've doubted whether it might be time to make a move or to transition. In fact, I've just come through one of those. Yeah. But I've never doubted that it's what God has called me to do. No. I gave up a legal career to do that. I'd won a place at university to studied law, but in the context of that began pastoring, and I knew that this is what I wanted to do. So I think I promised myself as a young man, if I pursue this as the thing that is also what sustains me financially, I don't mean ministries financially sustaining me, but getting paid to do this too. I made myself a promise when I made that decision that I would never say, what if? What would have happened if? I chose to close the door on I could have been doing so much more. And I actually think that I have the biggest influence that I can in my life doing what I'm doing now.
That's wonderful. So, talking about, one of the things I wanted to talk about and focus on today was about the whole transitional piece, because I guess as somebody who has worked with you at Spring Harvest the last few years and watched you transition, and for me leadership is all about transition. It's about helping the local church transition from one way of thinking to another, from one building project to another, from one event to another, to one meeting to 3 meetings, whatever your transition might be, in either theology or practice and activity. But how do you personally, as an individual, how have you processed your recent transition? Because it can sound easy from afar, but we are individuals and we have egos and we have challenges of position. And how have you managed that personally?
I think for me there's been a couple of important principles in that. In the leadership transition of Spring Harvest to Gavin. First of all, my identity isn't wrapped up in Spring Harvest. It's not wrapped up in being a pastor, actually. It's wrapped up in being a son of God. And because that identity is so profoundly important to me, and God did something so deep and profound in my life when I was 21, around that, 5 years after I got converted, that it's been one of the greatest gifts that I've ever had. So I don't define myself by whether I'm the leader of Spring Harvest or the lead pastor of Gold Hill or whatever title you want to use. That's a very helpful thing. Secondly, I don't think any leadership role is for life. And I think that that's a releasing and celebrating thing. I think it gives you the freedom to think and dream and be. And so that's a very helpful thing. I think thirdly for me, legacy is more important than power. So I want to leave a strong legacy behind me in my leadership of Spring Harvest or in my leadership of anything. And for it to be strong, it can't be Malcolm dependent. So when I came to lead Spring Harvest, I knew that. And when I was asked to lead it, I said I will lead it on the condition that this is a 5-year term and we instill that principle of 5-year terms for the leadership of Spring Harvest moving forward, because I think it's a healthy thing. So therefore I was always leading, believing that in 5 years I would be looking to see who God was raising up with a group of others. I didn't make that decision for who would lead it next. And I think that's all been very helpful. I think I don't consider myself an individualistic leader. I don't lead out of singularity. I think leadership in singularity is actually demonic because it's so counter-trinity that I think one of the things that the devil does with us is try to make us feel as if we are indispensable. And if we feel indispensable, then we are claiming a place of deity. Only God is indispensable. So if you're not individualistic, if you're not centering leadership around yourself, and you have a really great team, you're part of that team and others are part of the planning group team, then leadership transition becomes easier. So all the mechanisms are in place to make it easier. But then you have to make a decision that says, as we transition this, I'm going to get out of the way. I'm going to serve the new leader of Spring Harvest. I'm going to get behind their vision. I'm going to get behind what they do. I'm not going to be a nuisance, but nor am I going to pretend that I'm not me. So I believe that what I am doing now is still leading, but what I am leading now in is supporting and strengthening Gavin and his leadership and strengthening and supporting the team so that we have all the stability that we need. Because I think as far as I can lead, it's only a ceiling upon which is the floor of the generation that will come after me. So if I've done that well, then I'm content with that. But I'm not really driven by numbers. I'm not really driven by the big space. I'm not really driven by having to have accolades or affirmations and all of those things. I could quite happily lead 10 people. I could as happily lead 10 people as I could 20,000. So the kind of trappings around the edge of Spring Harvest don't define me. And because they don't define me, it's not that they don't matter. Of course, I want the thing to grow, and it is growing. But they are not of primary significance. What's primarily significant to me is, am I doing what Jesus asked me to do? And I think in all of my leadership roles, I want to transition people. And I want everybody I lead to be better than me at what I'm doing. And I want to release them to go further than I could go, and to be higher than I could be, and to achieve more than I could achieve, So I think it's wired into my DNA to always be looking for people and thinking they could do that better than me. They could do this. They could do that. They'd be really good at this. Let's encourage them into it.
And so, I mean, I've admired watching you do that. You make it sound like it's very simple and everyone should be wired this way. I think the reality is we've all probably got friends who they've struggled with transition from one role to another. The identity has been wrapped up in the title or the platform, whatever it might be. I'm aware there'll be people watching who will be leading local churches in a variety of settings around the UK. What kind of advice would you give to them who maybe they're thinking about a transition, either they feel like their time is done or they wanting to step into a new role, and how do they approach that? Have you got sort of practical advice that you mentioned some things there about identity, about having a time frame, about some of those aspects. Are there things that you think you could give advice to local church leaders from some of this experience you've had in recent times?
Well, maybe from a local church context too, because the church that I lead, I have led for 7 years now, and up until last year, the 2 previous senior pastors were both part of that church family. One of them passed away last year, Jim Graham, and I've had the joy of leading a church which has a really strong reputation, with 2 previous senior leaders still actively engaged in the church, and I think that's gone really well. I think any transition has to be a partnership. So let's say you were transitioning to me. No, I was transitioning to you, right? And you were a brilliant leader, and I was holding on to something. That transition isn't going to work.
Yeah.
Reverse it, and I'm transitioning to you, and you're an insecure leader, and I'm a leader that's ready to pass it on. There are going to be challenges and difficulties in that. So transition always involves relationship.
Yeah, that's good.
And it always involves a dialogue and a discussion. So for me, be open about the transition is the first thing. Be willing to say, okay, in this transition, how are we going to manage it? Let's develop and set out a roadmap. So when I transition from one thing to another, one of my core principles is I will never criticize the leader that I'm taking on from.
Yeah.
You do not have to criticize the past in order to build a different future. All you have to do is celebrate it. Celebrate the good things of the past, and you can step into the future with real confidence. Nor do you have to criticize where somebody is taking something when you let it go, because you haven't let it go. If you feel, and people will use language like, well, I started this, or I'm the founder, or it's part of my DNA, or it's the core of who I am. Actually, what you're saying is that this ministry or this role belongs to you more than it belongs to God. And I think what you have to start with is recognizing that ministry is never yours by right, it is yours by privilege. And God asks you to transition it, and to transition you have to let go. That means that things will be done differently. It means that it's not going to look the same. It means that decisions are going to be made that you're going to disagree with. You just have to learn not to talk about that. Or if you're going to talk about it, talk to the person that's making the decisions privately. So the roadmap for me, with any situation where I've transitioned, either where I'm transitioning into a role, or I'm transitioning out of it and passing it on to somebody else, involves honesty and a straightforward conversation that says, okay, where are the sticky points going to be about this? And how do we navigate it? So, in the church that I lead, when I came to it, the previous leader had been there for about 11 years. When he had come, the pastor before him had been there for 28 years. And the pastor that was pastoring when my predecessor was there vacated the church for 6 months so that my immediate predecessor could find his feet and establish relationships. When I came to Gold Hill, I sat down with my predecessor and he said to me, how would you like this to work? And I said, I'd like it to work this way. I'd like you to vacate the church for 3 months, not 6. I didn't feel there was a need of that because it was a different transitional period. He had come on the back of somebody who retired on the Saturday and he started on the Sunday.
Wow.
When I came, my predecessor had stood down 3 years before, so there already had been a period, but he was still there. So I said, I'd like you to vacate for 3 months. He said, okay, I can do that. I said, secondly, if there are any pastoral issues that come to you, can you please let me know? Because we need to be able to work on that together. He said, yeah, that's fine. And I said, and thirdly, please don't ever criticize the leadership, not just me, but the eldership, publicly. Please don't, if you have a problem with us, please tell us. If there's something that's not working, come and have a conversation with us. If you're unhappy with where we're going, let us know and we can talk about that. But I need your assurance that you're not going to pull apart the ministry. And he said, obviously, and he's a godly man, so he said, obviously I'll do that. And he said, what would happen if I didn't? I said, then we'd have to talk about you transitioning out of the church. So there's a clarity about that. It's not being aggressive or controlling. It's about being clear. Secondly, my next bit of conversation with him was, now how can I serve you for the rest of your ministry? How can I get behind you? How can I celebrate you? How can we use the facilities? How can we invest in you? What can we do to tell your story? And thirdly, anytime I speak of the predecessors at Gold Hill, I always honour them. So I say to people, one person brought this gift, another person brought this gift, a third person brought this gift, and I now bring this gift. When I was inducted at Gold Hill, I said to folk, imagine there are 4 sets of shoes on the platform.
Yeah.
One set of shoes fits a pastor who pastored in the early 1960s, called David Pawson. A second set of shoes fits the man that pastored for nearly 30 years, called Jim Graham. A third set of shoes fits the pastor who was immediately before me, Steve Gaukroger. And there's a fourth set of shoes, which are my shoes. Don't ask me to step into their shoes. They have gifts I didn't have, and they have skills I don't have, and they have abilities I don't have, and I have some that they don't have. This isn't some kind of false humility. I'm different. So let me lead as me, and we can take all of that and allow this interweaving of 4 or 5 strands to grow together. Now, when it comes from transitioning for me to let other people do something, I have to do the same. I have to say, Gavin isn't Malcolm Duncan. He doesn't need to be. Gavin has skills and gifts that I will never have. He's the right person to lead us forward. He has passion and energy and vision and lots of different things. I have gifts that Gavin doesn't have. So I will stand behind him. And my ministry is as important now as it was when I was leading Spring Harvest. It's now to hold up his arms, hold up your arms, and get behind where we're going.
Absolutely. I love that idea of transition. It isn't just taking on responsibility, ignoring the past, but actually honouring the past. I think too many times we've seen people take responsibility and almost change everything and almost make a bit of a statement that the old was a has-been, or they can almost be very dishonouring, and therefore you can actually undo a lot of the good work that has been done, rather than this idea that we honour the past and those who've gone before.
I think if you honour the past, God will honour you.
Absolutely.
And I think if you celebrate what God has done in other people, then they will celebrate you. And I have this very simple maxim: I'm never going to say something about somebody else in a spirit of anxiety or resentment, because I'm giving permission for somebody else to do that about me. So I want to speak of them as I would like them to speak of me.
Absolutely. We do sort of get what we sow, or we reap what we sow, as we always preach, and that's the truth within transition as well. Malcolm, one of the things, I've got some questions here that are coming in. Thank you for those who are sending some questions in. One of the things is, right now in the UK, we've gone through quite a transition regarding our political sort of landscape. I think it's been a fascinating few, I was about to say, a day is a long time in politics. The last few days have felt quite extreme to us. You know, we've seen the political leaders coming and going and changing and vying for new things. And I know you've got some connections into that political arena. Is there anything you can sort of say from a leadership point of view, or a transitional leadership point of view, that would be of relevance to people listening today?
Well, I think our nation is going through some of the biggest trauma and change that it's faced since the Second World War. And I think our political leaders need to hold on to their positions less and think about the priorities that will give us stability and a sense of security more. And I think that one of the challenges in transitions in political leadership is they're always so seismic. It's almost people have to be forced out before somebody else can be allowed in. And I think that, irrespective of your political views, the largest party in the political landscape in the United Kingdom is the Conservative Party. And as Theresa May seeks to form a government, she is doing so in a period of deep instability. I think there are dangers around that, and I think that there are opportunities. I think the dangers around where we are as a nation at the minute in terms of leadership is, there are a number. I think one of the dangers is the political instability itself. I think another is knee-jerk reactions and alliances that put safety at risk. And a third is, I think, people becoming very frustrated with the political process and frustrated with our leaders. I think the opportunities outweigh the dangers. I think there's an opportunity because we have a more energised and activated young generation of voters than we've had for decades and decades and decades. How could we not celebrate that? I think there's an opportunity around a different kind of leadership, which is much more collegiate, dialogical, and is listening more. And I'm not sure that we'll get that, but there's an opportunity for it. And I thirdly think that there's an opportunity to focus on the great political issue of our generation, which is the Brexit negotiations, and put political one-upmanship and marginalisation and gainsaying to one side, and allow for some kind of cross-party dialogue about how we're going to handle the Brexit negotiations, and then go back to the country in 18 months or 2 years. My fear is that those possibilities will be ignored because we have such an ingrained confrontational leadership model in UK politics, even in the way our House of Commons is constructed, that we fail to see the opportunity to do politics differently. I actually think that our political framework is reflecting what we used to be, while our democratic and social framework is framing what we are becoming. What I mean by that is our political framework is still built around confrontation and one person having to win an argument and another person having to lose it. Whilst our social democracy is now saying, can we please have a more collegiate and grown-up approach to what leadership looks like? Could you please talk to each other, listen to each other, and work together more? Now, I think that's the healthier model, but I think the challenge is that our political structures are so ingrained that we're going to allow ourselves to remain confrontational. Transitioning that model of leadership will take generations. But I think we're seeing some different types of politicians in the Tory party, in the Labour Party, and in the Liberal Democrats that are looking more towards ways of talking and listening than they are towards winning the argument and being right. And I think there's a lot of hope around that. The other thing that I would say is that we're also seeing leadership changing in our country at a national level, where things like being a Christian and being a conservative evangelical like I am, or a conservative like Tim Fallon is becoming politically unacceptable. There's nothing more dangerous. And I think we have to have a fully grown-up conversation about the illiberalism of our liberal leaders and the intolerance of our supposedly tolerant society. That's not just in politics, that's in the church too. So when we have conversations about the Bible, about sexuality, about women, about leadership, we have to, tolerance means you'll listen to each other. It doesn't mean that you shout down those that are conservative or those that are liberal. It means you listen. And I think we've seen evidence of intolerance in leadership and bad transitions in things like the Bishop of Sheffield and the prospective bishop, who was a conservative, having to withdraw his nomination because he felt that he couldn't bring consensus because nobody would support him. That's a dangerous signal to the church about tolerant leadership that allows room for different expressions. Because he stepped back because those that were anxious about his conservatism thought that he was going to be restricting, when he'd been clear that he wasn't going to be. The same thing has now happened with Tim Fallon. And we see it in education, we see it in business, we see it across our culture. The illiberalism of a liberal conversation and the intolerance of our current definition of tolerance is a hugely dangerous situation for us to be in.
I mean, these are challenging times. You're making some strong statements there. I find it fascinating. We just talked about how we transition leadership within a church setting or a Christian setting. We talked about honouring our past, we talked about partnership, and then we talk about political landscape and leadership, and we're talking about very different seismic shifts. We're talking about kind of, dismissing the past and, being intolerant of those that are in leadership. So we know that the values of leadership are the same across the board. They're not just a Christian value or a church value. These values work, and those that treat their predecessors a certain way will be treated by the same. Those that are up and coming in future times will come round again. I guess I've got one of the questions come up here around that, just asking how open should church leaders be, and you've answered some of this question, but how open should church leaders be about their own political beliefs? I guess some churches in the recent run-up to the election, the general election, some would have been very open and clear, and others would have been, much more reserved and not use the pulpit for that. What's your particular take on the role of the church?
I spoke about this on Sunday night in our own church at Gold Hill, actually, after the election. I have never told Gold Hill how I vote. I get asked thousands of times about the Brexit conversations. How did you vote? How did you vote? Not telling you. I am not a member of a political party. I have obviously got political opinions, and those that listen to me carefully can work them out.
Yeah.
But when it comes to the pulpit, my job is not to tell people how to vote. We are not in an Americanized democracy, nor are we in a continental European democracy, where it's almost an anathema to talk about politics at all. I think in a political sense and in a theological sense, we are genuinely in a third way. And I think therefore it's my job as a pastor and as a theologian and as somebody, as a public theologian that speaks into the public square, to give the best advice that I can, to represent opinions fairly, and to help people think, and to give them the ability to address a political conversation and to engage in it. So I would say to a pastor particularly, never tell people how to vote.
Yeah.
Never tell them that they have to follow your political leanings. Never tell them that you're right on this. Simply set out what you understand to be the teaching of Scripture and ask them to examine it. So when we were talking about it, I preached on the general election the Sunday before the general election, and gave some advice about Christians engaging in the political process. One of the things I said was vote. One of the things I said was recognise that there are Christians in all of the parties.
Yes. Yeah.
The church is not the Tory party at prayer, nor is it the Labour Party demonstrating with placards.
Yeah.
The third was examine the teaching of Jesus. And the fourth bit of advice was simply this: when you vote in this election, remember the poor, remember the marginalised, and remember the excluded. And the fifth was very simple: put your tick or your X in the box that you believe will create the best environment for people to flourish and the gospel to be furthered and the kingdom of God to be built. And if you're a Tory who believes in low taxation and small government, then you're going to lean to the right. But those are the questions that you answer. Will this help the poor? Not individualism. Not will it help me. Not will it make my family richer. Not will it feather my bed. Every Christian must ask, will this help the poor? Secondly, as you cast your vote, say, will this help human beings to flourish? And thirdly, will this create an atmosphere where the gospel can be preached and the kingdom can be extended? Now, if you're a Tory, you'll go to small government, small taxation. If you are a socialist or you're on the left, then you will believe in the common ownership of the means of distribution, exchange and manufacture. And you're going to be likely interested in higher taxation, bigger government and more intervention. And if you're a liberal, you'll believe that people have the ability to make choices that are based on their own freedom, and that they should make the best decision for the biggest good, the common good question.
Yeah.
Whatever political leaning you find yourself in, the teaching of Christ is still the same. Remember the poor, put the kingdom first, and do something that will help people flourish.
This is all really good, Malcolm. And it feels like we're having a lot of information and ideas and thoughts. You're summing up nicely what you've been talking about there. And I appreciate it's such a hot topic right now. We've got a few minutes left of our time together, and if there are any more questions coming in, that'd be great to have. We've got one here. Someone's talking about transition. They've asked the question here, Malcolm. How do you personally raise up and develop leaders? What do you do in that?
So there are a number of things for me personally and for me in the context of my ministry that are important for that. The first is being willing to invest in a generation coming behind me. So I'm looking for people to invest in. And as a result of that investment, there are things like mentoring, support, guidance, being a safe place for people to talk to, helping them work out what their gifts and their skills might be, thinking through with them some of the questions and challenges that they're facing, sharing some of my mistakes with them, and asking their advice. I don't think raising up another generation of leaders is about me saying, this is how I did it.
Yeah, copy me.
I think raising up a generation of leaders is about saying, this is where I got it wrong. What would you have done in this situation? Because they will have something to teach me. So in my own life, I have a fourfold approach to leadership. Watch how I do it. I'll do it with you. I'll watch how you do it. Then you do it. And it's very simple. But it's a mutual relationship of learning. It's not me sitting above a generation I'm trying to release, and some of the generation, I say generation not in terms of age, but in terms of experience, because there are lots of people older than you that might be a generation that you need to release into leadership. It's not age. Secondly, we invest in leadership at Gold Hill. I invest in leadership, so we have a leadership program that we invite people to go through, where we teach them theology, we give them opportunities to lead, we create safe environments for them to lead in, we allow them to fail, and we celebrate their effort and what they've learned rather than condoning their failure, or rather than condemning their failure. So it's about creating a culture for us which is always going. And as a leader, I have so much to learn. I'm mentored and invested in by other people. I'm not a finished product. So if I can remember that I'm on a journey, then it's my responsibility to help other people on the journey. And that's a key to transition right through this conversation. There's always somebody that's ahead of you in the leadership game that you can learn from. If you're not accountable to somebody, then you're not going to be a good leader. We have a principle at Gold Hill that I employ in my own life, and that is this: I am a Paul to some people, and I am a Timothy to other people. So I will always be able to support and help and encourage others that are emerging into leadership roles. And I will always be able to learn from others. So that mentoring and looking both ways and being a 360-degree leader is always helpful. And allowing yourself to be accountable. So at Gold Hill, I have a 360-degree feedback every year, anonymous, where people can say what they like about me. We have a really strong appraisal system and process. We have a really strong line management process. We have a development program for every person who's a leader in our church. We have a clear contract for them, volunteers as well. You're talking about 400 people. What they're going to do, how they're going to get invested in, how they can develop and grow, who they go to if they need help and support, what our leadership program looks like for them, and we review it every single year. And my own leadership, I lay at the feet of my elders, my trustees, my wider leadership team, and the whole Gold Hill family every 7 years, and ask them to affirm it again.
Malcolm, we need to bring things to an end, but you mentioned something there which you said was very simple, which I think actually is very significant in transition, about those 4 different levels of mentoring that you talked about, that you do it. Can you just remind us those again as we bring this to an end?
Watch how I do it.
Yeah.
I'll do it with you.
Yeah.
I'll watch how you do it. Then you do it.
Fantastic. We've got to in the UK church see that happen on a regular basis. We've got to have transition being part of our language, not a sort of a surprise. We never saw that coming. We must become. Thank you for your.
And we've got to be intentional about it.
Exactly.
Don't leave transition until crisis.
Yeah.
So if there are folk listening, and they're going to be transitioning out of ministry into retirement, or they're going to be moving on, they need to start thinking about that transition probably 3 to 5 years before they make it. And for those for whom that's too late, that might mean they have to stay somewhere an extra 6 months. It might mean they have to invest in leaders before, or it might mean that they have to create ways of enabling people to keep in touch with them when they leave. Do you know, I've been in pastoral ministry 30 years. Every single person that I've worked with in eldership is still a friend. Your friendships don't need to change because your responsibilities do.
Thank you, Malcolm, for your time today. I have just got one more question that's come in here, which I'm going to maybe ask them to contact you another time. But they've asked about, could they see your leadership development program from Gold Hill, which I'm sure you'd love to help people with that, but it's probably more than we've got time to.
All they need to do is drop me an email. If they go to the Gold Hill website and contact me, then we can talk about that. We have a plethora of ways in which we develop leadership. We run an intern program, a residency program. People can come and do some leadership training with us. We're happy to help.
So if you've heard some things today, you think, I'd love to hear more about that or find more, please do contact us either through Essential Christian or go to Malcolm's website, the Gold Hill Baptist Church, and we'd love to find ways to support you. We are about resourcing the local church. So thank you, Malcolm, for joining us and sharing your wisdom today. Next month, we are pleased to be joined by Pastor Yemi Adedeji from Jesus House in London, and he's also director of the One People Commission working for the Evangelical Alliance, and we're looking forward to having him with us. Please do take time to look at the Essential Christian website. We'd like to hear from you and to find out how we can serve you better through Essential Christian. And if there are things you'd like us particularly to talk about or people you think we'd love us to interview, then please do tell us. We'd love to find out more and serve you the best we can. Thank you for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you again next month. Thank you, Malcolm.